Hello all, my name is Evelyn, and today I'll be talking about Dead by Daylight. On October 26, 2017, Dead by Daylight was given a brand new license chapter, with the theme being the titular franchise, Nightmare on Elm Street. This was huge for Dead by Daylight, being its third licensed chapter and second to have a complete chapter featuring a new survivor, killer, and map. Nightmare on Elm Street is actually my favorite horror franchise, and while I did not play while this update was released, as soon as I began to get into Dead by Daylight, this chapter immediately caught my eye. Unfortunately, I was quite disappointed. Now, this video is not going to be complaining about the fact that the chapter features the 2010 remake version of Nightmare on Elm Street, or that Quintin looked like a drug dealer up until recently, because this wasn't really Behavior's fault. Dead by Daylight was not what it is today when this chapter was released. Currently, many consider it to be the Smash Bros. Of horror. Dead by Daylight in 2017 was a fun game, no doubt, but not a very big one with only 2 licenses. The companies Behavior collaborates with today are much more lenient and excited to collaborate nowadays because collaborating with Dead by Daylight is a huge favor to them as well. But in 2017, a Nightmare on Elm Street chapter was a much bigger favor for Dead by Daylight than it was for the Wes Craven estate, which explains the lack of cosmetics and the characters being based off of the poorly received 2010 remake. What I am going to be talking about is the current state of the chapter and how it could be improved upon. Currently, there really isn't much reason to buy the chapter. It's pretty well agreed upon in the community that Freddy's power is quite boring, his perks are terrible, and Quintin not being who most would want, and his perks are terrible other than pharmacy in my opinion. That's a very niche opinion. When I heard that the Nightmare would be getting another rework, I was excited, only to be disappointed at Behavior changing nothing but numbers. Now, how could these things be improved? I'm going to start with what this chapter does right in its current state. Blood Warden, while not being the best perk, is incredibly fitting for Freddy Krueger. It fits the ending of pretty much all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. Just when you think you've escaped, just when you think you've beaten Freddy, he always comes back. This perk fits him super well, and I congratulate Behavior for this perk idea. Certain aspects of Freddy's power are also pretty fitting for him. Dream pellets fit him, as in the movies, he enjoys messing with his victims, and overwhelming them as well. Teleporting to generators is also quite fitting for him, and is simply good for gameplay, as a way to appear in his victims' dreams. The idea of pharmacy also fits Quintin very well. His focus on staying awake, or in this case, really just staying alive, is extreme, and he is very well able to do what he must, just like in the movie. That's really it, honestly. As I said, there isn't much reason to buy this chapter, even as a Nightmare on Elm Street fan. The biggest and most important part of this chapter, in my opinion, is Freddy himself. Throughout all the movies, we often focus on different teenagers being haunted by Freddy, which is why Freddy himself and his power should be the focus of this video. Here's what I believe would make it for a better power for Freddy. Make the Garden Rake add-on base kit. The Dream Pallets are very fitting for Freddy, and would be much more interesting than Dream Snares. Freddy isn't really known for trapping his victims, but is known for screwing with them and overwhelming them. The Dream Snares could be an add-on, I suppose, but I'm not really going to go over hypothetical add-ons. The fact that Freddy interacts with his victims outside of the dream world just makes him much, well, Freddy. I think that the sleep timer at the beginning of the trial would still be a good idea, though. Just shorten it to maybe around 45 seconds. This would give Freddy some time to set up his pallets, and would be counterable as well. Survivors would need to spend time observing their surroundings, so they could know what's real and what isn't. Similar to Nemesis, I think a good idea would be to have pills scattered around the map to keep survivors awake. There would be a limited quantity, also similar to Nemesis. They would take very little time to pop. With time, these become less and less effective, just like the movies, how the teenagers slowly succumb to sleep no matter what they do. This would put the sleep timer that is already in the game to a pause. Survivors, once asleep, would not move in the real world, but would start in the same location that they were, now in the dream world, just like the movies. It makes little sense how survivors are repairing a generator while asleep. Survivors would instantly be snapped out of the dream world after, say, 20 seconds of being there. After waking up, the initial 45 seconds on the sleep timer would become shorter, maybe to 42 seconds, and would be asleep for longer. From 20 seconds to 25 to 30, and so on. They would also wake up when being hooked, and their timer would be paused as well, like it currently is. This isn't an exact formula, but more of just a general idea of his power. Game delay would also be what Freddy is. It's quite fitting for him, too. As in the movies, sleep becomes less and less inevitable. Survivors would also be able to use the current wake up action that is currently in place. This would take a while though, maybe like 10 seconds, and for every time it's completed, the amount of time to wake someone up would increase. This would create pressure and inspire decision making. Do I wake up my friend, or work on the generator before I fall asleep too? Once entering the dream world, Freddy would see the survivors' auras for about 5 seconds to gauge where they are so he can attack. Think of it like a lethal pursuer of sorts. Freddy would still have the ability to teleport to generators at the same rate, and this rate would be faster for more people that are asleep. And there we are. This would make Freddy much more strategic and, in my opinion, strong, with great map control and game delay, but also with counters that would be interesting to use and go against. I'm sure that was a handful. Now, let's go over how the perks for both sides could be improved. Blood Warden is easily Freddy's best perk. When you can pull it off, it is incredibly fun and you feel very powerful, as a killer should. However, the biggest issue is that survivors can almost always tell if you have it and just leave, making it a waste of a perk slot. The only thing I'd really change about this perk would be to make it so that the player has two choices with the perk. 1. Keep it as it is. Upon hooking a player when the endgame collapse is happening, Blood Warden will activate for 60 seconds. The second choice. No matter what, Blood Warden will activate at the press of a button. However, it will be a much shorter time, for example, 12 seconds. This wouldn't be unfair, but you'd still get value out of it, which is the biggest issue with the perk. Now, Fire Up. It's a great idea, but gets outclassed by pretty much every other perk. Do you want to break pallets quicker? Brutal Strength. You want to vault quicker? Bamboozle. And these are the entire trial without having to gain a token. Really, the only benefit is that you pick up survivors quicker, which can mess with flashlight saves, but if you want that, run Lightborn, Franklin's, or Infectious. The idea of Fire Up, however, isn't a bad one. Getting pissed that the survivors are winning sounds great. I think that's a better idea would be to simply gain a stackable 1% haste status effect for every generator completed. Lastly, remember me. Super easy. Literally just change it so that it also affects the obsession. I'm not sure why the obsession isn't affected, because all that does is encourage tunneling the obsession, so the perk is ensured to work, which isn't fun for the obsession or the killer if you're not a dick. And finally, Quintin. As with Freddy, the ideas of his perk are very fitting, but just aren't that effective. Pharmacy would require a simple change. Show the aura of a single chest, and that's it. This would literally just make it a better self-care, but also with a bonus to opening chests. Wake Up is a good idea as well, but it just needs some buffs. Show the auras of the exit gates to all survivors and increase the bonus of opening the exit gate to 30%. Lastly, Vigil. Vigil promises so much, but actually does so little. The blindness and hemorrhage effects are permanent, so this perk does literally nothing in this regard. Getting the hindered status effect happens very rarely as well. However, recovering from exhaustion quicker sounds nice, but at a rate of 20%, it's nothing to write home about. I'd really only use this perk with Sprint Burst in its current state. Vigil would also be so much better if instead you recover exhaustion even while running at a rate of 20%. This would be nice for numerous exhaustion perks. And there you have it. I believe these changes would also make this chapter not only appeal much more to Nightmare on Elm Street fans, but also make Freddy and the perks brought with this chapter much more viable to use. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed what you just saw, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. Have a great day!